Chapter 1. A quiet afternoon and an unexpected hello. Stephanie Drew wiped her hands on her apron and surveyed the greenhouse with quiet satisfaction. Rows of roses stretched like a painter's palette, crimson, ivory, blush pink, even a daring streak of orange. The air was warm and fragrant, a soft cocoon against the January chill outside. Her mother's laughter floated from the corner table, where three women sat sipping tea and dissecting the latest town gossip. "Steph, these lavender roses are divine," her mother called, holding up a bloom like a trophy. "You'll have the whole county lined up for Valentine's." Stephanie smiled. "That's the plan," she said, adjusting a bucket of stems. This year was different. Her roses were finally mature, ready for the holiday rush. For once, she felt ahead of the curve. The bell above the shop door chimed. Stephanie glanced up, expecting another early bird customer. Instead, a man stepped inside, tall and broad-shouldered, his coat dusted with snow. He paused, taking in the riot of color and the cozy greenhouse beyond. Something about him tugged at her memory, a quiet familiarity she couldn't place. She approached with her practiced smile. "Hi there, can I help you find something?" The man looked at her for a long moment, his gaze steady, almost amused. Then he smiled, a slow, warm curve that made her pulse skip. "Hello, Stephanie," he said. "It's been a long time." Her breath caught. He knew her name. She searched his face, peeling back years like layers of old wallpaper. And then it clicked. Middle school. 7th grade science class. Nathan Cole, the boy who never raised his hand, who always had a sketchbook tucked under his arm. His family moved away in 8th grade, and she hadn't thought of him since. "Nathan?" she ventured, her voice soft with disbelief. He nodded. "You remembered." Stephanie laughed, a little breathless. "Barely. You look different." "So do you," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "No braces. Thank God," she muttered, and they both laughed. The sound felt easy, like slipping into an old sweater. "What brings you back?" she asked, gesturing toward the greenhouse. "Not that I'm complaining. My uncle needed help with his hardware store," Nathan said. "I'm here for a few months." Stephanie nodded, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest. "Well, welcome back, and welcome to Drew's Blooms. Looking for anything special?" Nathan glanced around, his gaze lingering on the roses. "Actually, yes. I need flowers. For my aunt. She's been under the weather." "Roses," Stephanie suggested. "They're classic." He smiled. "You're the expert." She led him to the display, explaining the meanings behind each color. Red for love, yellow for friendship, pink for admiration. Nathan listened intently, his hands in his pockets, his expression thoughtful. "Yellow," he said finally. "Friendship seems right." Stephanie wrapped the bouquet, her fingers steady despite the hum of awareness between them. When she handed it over, their hands brushed, a fleeting touch that sent a spark up her arm. "Thanks," Nathan said, his voice low. "It's good to see you again, Stephanie." "You too," she replied, and meant it. As the bell chimed behind him, Stephanie stood among her roses, her heart unexpectedly light. She told herself it was nothing, a simple reunion, a friendly exchange. But deep down, she knew better. Chapter 2, Roses and Reminders. Stephanie locked the shop door behind the last customer and exhaled, the quiet settling over her like a soft blanket. The greenhouse glowed under the string lights she'd hung years ago, casting a warm shimmer across petals and leaves. She loved this time of day, the lull after the rush, when the flowers seemed to breathe with her. She sank into the stool behind the counter and stared at the bouquet Nathan had chosen earlier. Yellow roses, friendship. It was such a simple choice, yet it lingered in her mind like a melody she couldn't shake. Nathan Cole. She hadn't thought of him in years, and now his voice, low, steady, echoed in her head. "Hello, Stephanie. It's been a long time." The way he said her name like it mattered, like he remembered more than braces and awkward middle school dances. Stephanie shook herself and reached for her planner. Valentine's Day was 2 weeks away, and orders were piling up. She flipped through the pages, jotting notes, but her mind kept drifting back to the past. The city skyline, the hum of ambition, the sharp sting of betrayal. She had been good at her job. More than good. She'd loved the challenge, the late nights brainstorming campaigns, the thrill of seeing her ideas come to life. Until the day everything collapsed. One email, one accusation, and suddenly she was the villain in a story she didn't write. Stephanie swallowed hard, the memory bitter as old coffee. She tried to fight it. God, she had, but the evidence was ironclad. Unauthorized access from her login, files leaked to a competitor. She had her work logs, her alibis, but no one cared. They fired her, blacklisted her, and left her reputation in ashes. She'd packed her life into boxes and driven home with tears blurring the highway. Humility wasn't something she'd asked for, but it had come anyway, heavy and unrelenting. And yet, here she was, a flower shop owner with dirt under her nails and roses in her care. It wasn't the life she imagined, but it was hers. And for the first time in years, she felt steady. The bell above the door chimed. Stephanie startled, glancing up. Nathan stood there again, snow melting on his boots, a paper bag in one hand. He smiled, and the greenhouse seemed to brighten. "Sorry," he said, holding up the bag. "I know you're closed. I brought coffee as a peace offering." Stephanie blinked. "Peace offering? For what?" "For interrupting your evening," he said, stepping inside. "I figured you could use caffeine. Or company." She hesitated, then laughed. "Both, actually." Nathan crossed the room, his presence easy, unhurried. He set the bag on the counter and pulled out 2 cups. "I wasn't sure what you liked, so I went with caramel latte." "Safe bet." "Very safe," Stephanie said, accepting the cup. Their fingers brushed again, and her pulse did that ridiculous skip. Nathan leaned against the counter, his gaze sweeping the greenhouse. "This place is incredible. You built all this." "With a lot of help," Stephanie said. "My dad built the greenhouse. Mom keeps the gossip corner running." She nodded toward the table where her mother and friends usually held court. Nathan chuckled. "I remember your mom. She used to bake cookies for the school fair." "She still does," Stephanie said, smiling. "Some things never change." They sipped their coffee in companionable silence for a moment, the hum of the heater filling the space. Then Nathan said, "So, what made you start this?" Stephanie traced the rim of her cup. "Honestly, I needed a fresh start. Things didn't exactly work out in the city." Nathan's brows lifted. "You left after college, right?" "Yeah," she said, her voice careful. "I had a good job. For a while." "What happened?" His tone was gentle, curious, not prying. Stephanie hesitated. She didn't talk about this, not to anyone outside her family. But something in Nathan's steady gaze made her want to tell the truth. "I got fired," she said finally. "For something I didn't do." Nathan's expression softened. "I'm sorry. It was bad," Stephanie admitted. "They accused me of leaking company secrets. Said the evidence was clear. But I wasn't even in the building when it happened." Nathan frowned. "That sounds awful." "It was," Stephanie said, forcing a smile. "Anyway, I came home, regrouped, and decided to do something I've always loved. Flowers don't lie." Nathan studied her for a long moment, then said quietly, "You're stronger than you think." Stephanie blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "Most people would have folded," he said. "You built something beautiful instead." Heat crept up her neck. She looked away, pretending to fuss with a vase. "Well, I had help." Nathan smiled. "Still, it's impressive." Stephanie cleared her throat, desperate to steer the conversation. "What about you? What have you been up to since 8th grade?" Nathan chuckled. "A lot of boring stuff. College, jobs, moving around. I worked in construction for a while, then design. Now I'm back here, helping my uncle with his store." "Design?" Stephanie asked, intrigued. "Architectural," Nathan said. "Mostly residential projects." Stephanie grinned. "So you traded sketchbooks for blueprints?" He laughed. "Pretty much." They talked until the coffee cooled, weaving through years like threads in a tapestry. Old teachers, favorite hangouts, the absurdity of middle school fashion. Stephanie found herself laughing more than she had in weeks, the sound light and unguarded. When Nathan finally stood to leave, the greenhouse felt emptier. He paused at the door, his hand on the frame. "Thanks for the coffee," Stephanie said, smiling. "Any time," Nathan replied. His gaze lingered, warm and steady. "See you soon, Stephanie." The bell chimed, and he was gone. Stephanie stood among her roses, her heart humming like a bee in summer. She told herself it was nothing, a friendly visit, a shared memory. But deep down, she knew the truth. Something was beginning to bloom. Chapter 3: Coffee and Catching Up. The next morning, Stephanie woke to the soft patter of rain against her bedroom window. It was the kind of gray January day that made the greenhouse glow like a jewel. She dressed quickly. Jeans, a cozy sweater, boots, and headed out, the damp air curling her hair as she crossed the gravel drive. Inside the shop, the scent of roses and fresh soil greeted her like an old friend. She flicked on the lights, humming under her breath as she arranged a display of pink carnations. Valentine's orders were stacking up, and she needed every spare minute to stay ahead. She was halfway through trimming stems when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Morning, Stephanie. Hope I'm not being too forward. Coffee later? My treat. Nathan." Stephanie stared at the screen, her heart doing that ridiculous flutter again. Coffee. With Nathan. She bit her lip, debating. It wasn't a date, just catching up. 2 old classmates reconnecting. Totally harmless. She typed back before she could overthink. "Sure. When? Noon? There's a cafe near the square. The one with the blue awning." Stephanie smiled. "Sounds good. See you then." By noon, the rain had softened to a mist, turning the town square into a watercolor painting. Stephanie parked near the cafe and spotted Nathan immediately. Tall, relaxed, leaning against the brick wall like he belonged there. He wore a navy jacket and a smile that made her pulse skip. "Hey," he said as she approached, his voice warm against the chill. "You made it." "Wouldn't miss it," Stephanie replied, tugging her scarf loose. I've been craving coffee all morning. Nathan grinned. Then let's fix that. Inside, the cafe was cozy and bustling, the air rich with espresso and cinnamon. They snagged a corner table and Nathan ordered for both of them, caramel latte for her, black coffee for him. When the drinks arrived, steaming and fragrant, Stephanie wrapped her hands around her cup like it was a lifeline. So, Nathan said, settling back, tell me everything. What's life like as the Flower Queen of Tunbridge? Stephanie laughed. Flower Queen? That's a new one. Own it, Nathan said, his eyes twinkling. Seriously, though, this shop, it's impressive. Stephanie shrugged, a little shy under his praise. It started small, just a greenhouse and a dream. Now it's bigger than I expected. Do you like it? He asked. I love it, she said without hesitation. It's peaceful, honest. Flowers don't play office politics. Nathan chuckled. Fair point. Stephanie sipped her latte, then tilted her head. What about you? You said you're helping your uncle? Yeah, Nathan said. He owns Cole's Hardware. Needed an extra pair of hands after surgery. Stephanie nodded. That's nice of you. Nathan smiled. He's family. And honestly, I needed a break. A break from what? She asked. Work, Nathan said, his tone thoughtful. I was doing architectural design. Big projects, tight deadlines. It was a lot. Stephanie studied him. Did you like it? I did, Nathan said slowly. But somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling like mine. I was chasing contracts, managing clients, barely sleeping. Coming back here, it's like breathing again. Stephanie understood that more than she wanted to admit. Funny how life does that, she murmured. Pushes you out, then pulls you back. Nathan's gaze softened. Yeah, funny. They fell into easy conversation, weaving through years like threads, college stories, favorite books, the absurdity of middle school fashion. Stephanie found herself laughing more than she had in months, the sound light and unguarded. At one point, Nathan leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Do you ever miss it? The city? Stephanie hesitated. Sometimes, she admitted. The energy, the possibilities. But then I remember how it ended. And, no, I don't miss that part. Nathan's expression was gentle. You didn't deserve what happened. Stephanie blinked. You don't even know the details. I know you, Nathan said simply. At least I think I do. You were always steady, honest. Heat crept up Stephanie's neck. She looked away, pretending to fuss with her cup. Well, thanks. Nathan smiled. Just telling the truth. They lingered until the rain stopped, the cafe emptying around them. When they finally stepped outside, the sky was pale blue, the air crisp with promise. Thanks for the coffee, Stephanie said, smiling. Any time, Nathan replied. His gaze lingered, warm and steady. Maybe next time, lunch? Stephanie's heart skipped. Maybe, she said, her voice light. Nathan grinned. I'll hold you to that. He walked her to her car, his stride easy, his presence comforting in a way she hadn't expected. When he said goodbye, Stephanie felt a pang, like closing a book she didn't want to end. Driving back to the shop, she told herself it was nothing. Just coffee, just catching up. But deep down, she knew better. Something was blooming, and this time it wasn't just the roses. Chapter 4 Gossip in Bloom. Stephanie had barely unlocked the shop door when she heard the familiar chorus of voices drifting from the greenhouse corner. Her mother and two friends, Marjorie and Elaine, were already settled at their usual table, steaming mugs in hand, surrounded by a fortress of pastries. The gossip brigade was in full bloom. Morning, sweetheart, her mother called, waving a croissant like a flag. We were just talking about you. Stephanie groaned inwardly. That's never a good sign. Oh, it's a wonderful sign, Marjorie said, her eyes twinkling behind cat eyeglasses. We heard you were seen at the cafe yesterday. With a man. Stephanie froze mid-step, clutching her tote like a shield. You heard. Elaine leaned forward, conspiratorial. Small town, dear. News travels faster than pollen. Stephanie sighed, setting her bag on the counter. It was coffee. That's all. Her mother's smile was pure mischief. Coffee can lead to all sorts of things. Like caffeine jitters, Stephanie muttered, arranging a vase of tulips with unnecessary precision. Marjorie fanned herself dramatically. Was he handsome? Stephanie hesitated, then gave up. Yes. Three heads swiveled in unison, eyes gleaming like magpies spotting something shiny. Name? Elaine demanded. Nathan, Stephanie said, resigned. Nathan Cole. Her mother gasped. Nathan Cole? From middle school? The quiet one with the sketchbook. Stephanie blinked. You remember that? Of course, her mother said. He was such a sweet boy, always polite. His family moved away, didn't they? 8th grade, Stephanie confirmed, trying to sound casual. He's back helping his uncle. Marjorie clasped her hands. And now he's having coffee with you. How romantic. It wasn't romantic, Stephanie protested, heat creeping up her neck. We were catching up. Elaine smirked. Did he look at you like you were a bouquet of roses? Stephanie sputtered. What does that even mean? Like you're the prettiest thing in the room, Elaine said, sipping her tea with smug satisfaction. Stephanie busied herself with the roses, pretending not to hear. But the truth was, Nathan had looked at her like that, warm, steady, like he saw more than petals and stems. And that thought was far more dangerous than gossip. The bell above the door chimed, and Stephanie nearly dropped a vase. Nathan stepped inside, snow melting on his boots, a paper bag in one hand. His gaze swept the room, landing on her, and just like that, the greenhouse felt smaller, warmer. "Morning," he said, his voice easy. Stephanie managed to smile. "Hi." Her mother and friends exchanged glances so loaded with meaning they could power a small town. Stephanie shot them a warning look that said, "Don't you dare." But it was like telling bees not to buzz. Nathan approached the counter, oblivious to the silent theatrics. "Brought you something," he said, holding out the bag. Stephanie peeked inside. "Scones. Fresh, golden, still warm." "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Nathan said simply. "Consider it fuel for the Valentine's madness." Stephanie laughed. "You have no idea." Nathan's gaze flicked to the greenhouse corner, where 3 women were pretending very hard not to eavesdrop. "You've got an audience," Stephanie groaned. "Ignore them. They're harmless." "Harmless," Marjorie whispered loudly. "Like a fox in a henhouse." Stephanie shot her a glare. Nathan chuckled, clearly amused. "I like them," he said. "They remind me of my mom's book club." "Don't encourage them," Stephanie warned. But she was smiling. Nathan leaned on the counter, his presence easy, grounding. "So what's the plan for today?" "More roses." "Always," Stephanie said. "I've got orders coming out of my ears." "Need a hand?" Nathan asked. Stephanie blinked. "You're offering to help in a flower shop?" "Why not?" Nathan said, grinning. "I'm good with my hands." Stephanie's brain short-circuited for a second, and judging by the muffled giggles from the corner, so did the gossip brigade. She cleared her throat. "It's not glamorous work." "I'm not afraid of dirt," Nathan said. "Besides, I owe you for the coffee." Stephanie hesitated, then shrugged. "Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you." An hour later, Nathan was elbow-deep in buckets, sorting stems with surprising efficiency. Stephanie watched him from across the counter, trying not to stare at the way his sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong forearms dusted with droplets of water. He looked good. Too good for someone handling thorny roses. "You're a natural," she said, arranging a bouquet. Nathan grinned. "Don't sound so surprised." "I'm impressed," Stephanie admitted. "Most people panic around thorns." "Thorns are just misunderstood," Nathan said, his tone teasing. "Like people." Stephanie laughed, shaking her head. "You're full of wisdom today." "Must be the company," Nathan said, his gaze warm. Stephanie felt her cheeks heat and quickly turned back to the flowers. But inside, something fluttered. Soft, insistent, impossible to ignore. By the time Nathan left, the shop looked like a Valentine's dream, and Stephanie's heart felt like a tangled bouquet, bright, messy, and full of possibility. Her mother and friends pounced the moment the door closed. "He's smitten," Marjorie declared. Stephanie rolled her eyes. "He's helpful." Elaine smirked. "Helpful men don't bring scones and volunteer for roses." Stephanie opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, because deep down she knew they were right. Something was blooming, and this time it wasn't just the flowers. Chapter 5, A Valentine's Rush. By the second week of February, Stephanie's flower shop looked like Cupid's headquarters. Roses spilled from buckets in every shade imaginable. Crimson, ivory, blush pink, even a daring streak of orange. The air was thick with perfume and panic. Valentine's Day was 2 days away, and orders were coming faster than she could breathe. Stephanie darted between the counter and the greenhouse, her apron dusted with petals, her hair escaping its bun in rebellious curls. She had 3 bouquets to finish, 5 deliveries to schedule, and a phone that wouldn't stop ringing. Somewhere in the chaos, she'd lost track of time and her sanity. "Steph," her mother called from the gossip corner, where she and her friends were sipping tea like queens surveying a battlefield. "You need reinforcements." Stephanie laughed breathlessly. "Unless you've got a team of florists hiding under that table, I'm doomed." The bell above the door chimed, and Stephanie groaned. Another customer. She plastered on a smile and turned, only to freeze when she saw Nathan standing there, snow melting on his boots, a grin playing at his lips. "Looks like you're in the trenches," he said, taking in the floral explosion. "You have no idea," Stephanie muttered, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "It's chaos." Nathan stepped closer, his gaze warm. "Need a hand?" Stephanie blinked. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Nathan said. "I've got 2 good hands and no plans." Stephanie hesitated for half a second, then surrendered. "Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you." Nathan grinned. "I like a challenge." 10 minutes later, Nathan was elbow-deep in roses, sleeves rolled up, sorting stems like he'd been born for it. Stephanie watched him from across the counter, trying not to stare at the way his forearms flexed as he worked. or how his hair fell across his forehead in a way that made her fingers itch to brush it back. "You're a natural," she said, arranging a bouquet. Nathan flashed a grin. "Don't sound so surprised." "I'm impressed," Stephanie admitted. "Most people panic around thorns." "Thorns are just misunderstood," Nathan said, his tone teasing. "Like people." Stephanie laughed, shaking her head. "You're full of wisdom today." "Must be the company," Nathan said, his gaze lingering just long enough to make her pulse skip. The shop buzzed like a hive. Customers streamed in, orders piled up, and through it all, Nathan moved with easy competence, wrapping bouquets, fetching buckets, even charming the occasional impatient customer with that warm smile. Stephanie couldn't decide if she was grateful or distracted, probably both. At one point, they reached for the same ribbon spool, and their fingers brushed, a fleeting touch that sent a spark up Stephanie's arm. She froze, her breath catching, and Nathan's eyes met hers, steady and unreadable. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that single point of contact. Then the phone rang, shattering the moment. Stephanie jerked back, fumbling for the receiver, her cheeks flaming. Nathan turned away, but she swore she saw the corner of his mouth curve. By late afternoon, the shop looked like a Valentine's dream instead of a disaster zone. Stephanie leaned against the counter, exhausted but triumphant. Nathan stood beside her, his shirt dusted with petals, his hair mussed, his grin pure mischief. "Not bad for a rookie," Stephanie said, handing him a bottle of water. Nathan took a long drink, then smirked. "Admit it. You'd have drowned without me." Stephanie laughed. "Fine. You were a lifesaver." Nathan's gaze softened. Anytime, Stephanie felt her heart do that ridiculous flutter again. She told herself it was nothing, gratitude, adrenaline, but deep down, she knew better. As Nathan gathered his coat, her mother and friends pounced like cats on a mouse. "You're a hero," Marjorie declared, patting his arm. "Stephanie would have been buried under roses without you." Nathan chuckled. "Happy to help." Elaine winked. "You should come back tomorrow. Valentine's Day is the real storm." Nathan glanced at Stephanie, his smile slow and deliberate. "Maybe I will." Stephanie's cheeks burned. "Don't listen to them," she muttered, ushering him toward the door. Nathan leaned close, his voice low enough for her alone. "I wasn't listening to them." The bell chimed, and he was gone, leaving Stephanie standing among her roses, her heart tangled in thorns and petals. Something was blooming, and this time it wasn't just the flowers. Chapter 6, The Past Comes Knocking. The morning after the Valentine's rush felt like the calm after a storm. Stephanie stood in the greenhouse, sipping coffee and admiring the neat rows of roses, each bloom a tiny miracle. The shop was quiet, sunlight streaming through the glass, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Stephanie glanced at the screen and froze. Subject: new information regarding your termination from unknown sender. Her stomach dropped. She stared at the words, her pulse thudding in her ears. For a moment, she considered ignoring it, pretending it didn't exist. But curiosity clawed at her, relentless. She opened the email. "Stephanie, I know what happened at your old company wasn't your fault. There's proof now, logs showing someone else used your credentials remotely. If you want to clear your name, contact me. Discretion is key." A friend. Stephanie read it twice, her hands trembling. Proof. After all these years, someone was saying there was proof. She gripped the counter, memories flooding back. The sterile conference room, the HR manager's cold eyes, the humiliation that burned hotter than anger. She had buried that chapter, locked it away. And now here it was, clawing its way back. The bell above the door chimed, and Stephanie jolted, shoving her phone into her pocket. Nathan stepped inside, his smile easy, his presence grounding in a way she desperately needed. "Morning," he said, brushing snow from his jacket. "You look tense." Stephanie forced a smile. "Just tired." Nathan studied her for a beat, then nodded toward the counter. "Brought reinforcements." He held up a paper bag. "Scones." Again. Stephanie laughed weakly. "You're going to spoil me." "That's the plan," Nathan said, his grin warm. "How's the Valentine's chaos?" "Survivable," Stephanie said, though her voice lacked its usual spark. Nathan's brows furrowed. "Steph, what's wrong?" Stephanie hesitated. She didn't talk about this, not to anyone outside her family. But something in Nathan's steady gaze made her want to tell the truth. "I got an email," she said finally, "about the past." Nathan's expression softened. "The job?" Stephanie nodded, swallowing hard. "Someone says they have proof I didn't do it." Nathan stepped closer, his voice low. "That's good, isn't it?" "I don't know," Stephanie admitted. "It's been years. I built a new life. Do I really want to dig it all up?" Nathan's gaze was gentle, unwavering. "Steph, you didn't deserve what happened. If there's a chance to clear your name." Stephanie looked away, her throat tight. "It's complicated." Nathan didn't push. He just stood there, solid and calm, like an anchor in a storm. "Whatever you decide," he said quietly. "You're not alone." Stephanie blinked, heat prickling behind her eyes. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that, how much she needed someone to stand beside her, even when the ground shifted. "Thank you," she whispered. Nathan smiled, slow and steady. "Anytime." They spent the morning working side by side, arranging bouquets, wrapping orders. Stephanie tried to focus on the flowers, their colors, their symmetry, but her mind kept circling back to the email. Proof. Discretion. A friend. Questions bloomed like weeds. Who sent it? Why now? And what would it cost to chase the truth? At one point, Nathan reached for a vase, and their hands brushed, a fleeting touch that sent a spark up Stephanie's arm. She froze, her breath catching, and Nathan's eyes met hers, warm and steady. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that single point of contact. Then the phone rang, shattering the moment. Stephanie jerked back, fumbling for the receiver, her cheeks flaming. Nathan turned away, but she swore she saw the corner of his mouth curve. By late afternoon, the shop was quiet again. Nathan gathered his coat, his presence lingering like sunlight after a storm. "Promise me something," he said, his voice low. Stephanie tilted her head. "What?" "Don't let fear make the decision for you," Nathan said. "You're stronger than you think." Stephanie swallowed hard, her heart tangled in thorns and petals. "I'll try," Nathan smiled. "That's all I ask." The bell chimed, and he was gone, leaving Stephanie alone with her roses, and an email that felt like a ticking clock. Chapter 7: A Misunderstanding Blooms. The day after Valentine's felt like a hangover. Petals scattered like confetti, empty buckets stacked in corners, and Stephanie moving through the shop with the sluggish grace of someone who'd run a marathon. She was exhausted but proud. The holiday rush had been brutal, but she'd survived. With Nathan's help, she'd even thrived. She was rinsing vases when her mother breezed in, cheeks pink from the cold, eyes sparkling with gossip. "Guess what I heard?" her mother said, peeling off her gloves. Stephanie groaned. "If this is about Nathan." "It is," her mother said cheerfully. "Marjorie's niece works at the hardware store. She says Nathan's uncle told someone he's leaving town soon." Stephanie froze, the vase slipping in her hands. "Leaving?" Her mother nodded, oblivious to the way Stephanie's stomach dropped. "Heading back to the city. Something about a big project." Stephanie forced a laugh, but it sounded brittle. "Well, good for him." Her mother studied her, eyes narrowing. "You okay?" "I'm fine," Stephanie lied, turning back to the sink. Why wouldn't I be? But inside, her thoughts spun like leaves in a storm. Nathan was leaving, without saying a word. After everything, the coffee, the laughter, the way he'd looked at her like she mattered, he was just gone? Stephanie swallowed hard, anger and hurt tangling in her chest. She told herself it didn't matter. They weren't dating. They weren't anything. But the truth was she'd started to hope. And hope was a fragile thing. The bell above the door chimed, and Stephanie stiffened. Nathan stepped inside, snow melting on his boots, his smile easy, like nothing had changed. "Morning," he said, brushing off his jacket. "Survived the Valentine's madness?" "Barely," Stephanie said, her tone cooler than she intended. Nathan frowned. "You okay?" "I'm fine," Stephanie said, too quickly. She grabbed a bucket, pretending to fuss with stems. "Busy." Nathan hesitated, then stepped closer. "Steph, don't," she said, sharper than she meant. "If you're leaving, just say it." Nathan blinked. "Leaving?" Stephanie turned, her heart pounding. "Your uncle told someone. Big project. Back to the city." Nathan stared at her, then laughed. A short, incredulous sound. "Steph, I'm not leaving." Stephanie blinked. "You're not." "No," Nathan said, his voice steady. "I turned that project down." Stephanie's breath caught. "Why?" Nathan's gaze softened. "Because I like it here." Stephanie swallowed hard, her cheeks burning. I didn't know." Nathan stepped closer, his expression gentle. "You could have asked." Stephanie looked away, shame prickling her skin. "I didn't want to assume." Nathan smiled, slow and warm. "You can assume I'm not going anywhere." The tension eased, but Stephanie's heart still thudded like a drum. She busied herself with flowers, trying to ignore the way Nathan's presence filled the room. Steady, grounding, impossible to ignore. At one point, he reached for a ribbon, and their fingers brushed, a fleeting touch that sent a spark up her arm. Stephanie froze, her breath catching, and Nathan's eyes met hers, warm and steady. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that single point of contact. Then her mother cleared her throat loudly from the corner, and the moment shattered like glass. By the time Nathan left, Stephanie felt wrung out, relieved, embarrassed, and something else she didn't want to name. She watched him walk away, his stride easy, his smile lingering like sunlight after rain. She told herself it was nothing, just a misunderstanding, just relief. But deep down, she knew better. Something was blooming, and this time it wasn't just the flowers. Chapter 8: Clearing the Air. Stephanie woke to sunlight streaming through her curtains, bright and unapologetic. It should have felt like a good day. The Valentine's storm was over, orders were delivered, and the shop was finally calm. But her chest still carried the weight of yesterday's misunderstanding, heavy and awkward. She'd overreacted. She knew that now. Jumping to conclusions, snapping at Nathan, it wasn't fair. He hadn't deserved that. And the way he'd looked at her before leaving, quiet and steady, like he understood more than she said, it lingered. Stephanie sighed, pulling on jeans and a soft sweater. She'd apologize. That was the plan. Simple, direct, no overthinking. Except her stomach knotted every time she pictured his face. The shop was quiet when she arrived, sunlight spilling across rows of roses like liquid gold. She busied herself with trimming stems, trying to ignore the hum of nerves under her skin. She was halfway through arranging a bouquet when the bell above the door chimed. Nathan stepped inside, snow melting on his boots, his smile easy, but his eyes held something else, something careful. "Morning," he said, his voice warm but measured. Stephanie swallowed hard. "Hi." Nathan crossed the room, his presence grounding in a way she hadn't realized she needed. "How's the flower queen today?" Stephanie managed a laugh, trying to keep the crown straight. Nathan smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes, and that was worse than anger. She set down the scissors, her heart thudding. "Nathan," she said softly. "About yesterday." He tilted his head, waiting. "I'm sorry," Stephanie said, the words tumbling out. "I shouldn't have assumed. I shouldn't have snapped. When I heard you were leaving, it surprised me." Nathan studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I get it." Stephanie blinked. "You do?" "Yeah," Nathan said, his voice gentle. "You've had people walk away before. It makes sense you'd expect it." Stephanie's breath caught. He wasn't wrong. The city, the job, the friends who vanished when her reputation burned. She'd learned the hard way that good things didn't last. "I didn't want you to think." She hesitated, heat creeping up her neck. "I didn't want you to think I didn't care." Nathan's gaze softened, warm and steady. "Steph, I never thought that." Stephanie swallowed hard, her throat tight. "You turned down a big project." "Why?" Nathan smiled, slow and deliberate. "Because I wanted to stay. Because I like it here." His eyes held hers, unwavering. "Because I like you." Stephanie's breath hitched. The words hung between them, fragile and electric. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Just a rush of heat and a flutter in her chest that felt dangerously like hope. Nathan stepped closer, his voice low. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I just wanted you to know." Stephanie stared at him, her heart pounding like wings against glass. She wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but the words tangled. So she did the only thing she could. She smiled, small, shaky, but real. "Thank you," she whispered. Nathan's smile deepened, warm enough to melt the frost between them. Anytime. They spent the rest of the morning working side by side, the air lighter now, threaded with something unspoken but undeniable. Stephanie found herself laughing again, the sound easy, unguarded. At one point, Nathan reached for a ribbon, and their fingers brushed, a fleeting touch that sent a spark up her arm. This time, neither of them looked away. When Nathan finally left, the bell chimed softly, and Stephanie stood among her roses, her heart humming like a bee in summer. The misunderstanding was gone, but something else had taken root. Something tender, something bright, something was blooming. And this time, it wasn't just the flowers. Chapter 9, The Big Gesture. Stephanie was closing up the shop when her phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Can you meet me at the greenhouse tonight? 7 p.m. Trust me." She stared at the message, her pulse quickening. Trust him? She did, more than she expected. But curiosity bloomed like a stubborn bud, refusing to be ignored. "Okay," she typed back. "See you then." By 7, the sky was a velvet canvas, stars pricking through the dark. Stephanie walked the gravel path to the greenhouse, her breath misting in the cold. The glass structure glowed softly, light spilling like honey onto the snow. She pushed the door open and stopped dead. The greenhouse had been transformed. Candles flickered along the tables, casting golden halos on petals. Strings of fairy lights draped overhead like constellations. Roses, her roses, were everywhere, arranged in sweeping arcs of color. Crimson, ivory, blush pink, and a single trail of yellow blooms leading to the center. Nathan stood there, hands in his pockets, looking like he belonged in this dreamscape. When he saw her, his smile was slow, warm, and just a little nervous. "Wow," Stephanie whispered, stepping inside. "Nathan, what is this?" "A thank you," he said simply, "for letting me be part of this place. For the coffee. For everything." Stephanie blinked, her throat tight. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Nathan said, his voice steady. "You've built something beautiful here, Steph. And I thought, maybe tonight you could just enjoy it." Stephanie swallowed hard, her heart thudding like wings against glass. "It's incredible." Nathan smiled, relief flickering in his eyes. "Good, because there's more." He gestured toward the center table, where a single bouquet rested, a mix of roses in every color, tied with a ribbon. Stephanie stepped closer, her fingers trembling as she touched the petals. "They're all yours," Nathan said softly. "Every color means something. Love, friendship, admiration. All of it. Because that's what you deserve." Stephanie looked up, her breath catching. "Nathan." He stepped closer, his gaze warm and unwavering. "I know you've been through hell. I know trust doesn't come easy. But I'm here, Steph. I'm not going anywhere." The words hung between them, fragile and electric. Stephanie felt something inside her shift, like a door opening, like sunlight breaking through clouds. She wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but the words tangled. So she did the only thing she could. She reached for his hand. Nathan's fingers closed around hers, strong and sure. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that single point of contact. The warmth of his skin, the steady rhythm of his breath, the quiet promise in his eyes. And then he smiled, slow and tender, and Stephanie knew. This wasn't just a gesture. It was a beginning. They sat among the roses, talking until the candles burned low. About childhood dreams and city lights, about second chances and the courage to take them. Stephanie laughed, cried, and somewhere in the quiet, she realized something she hadn't dared to believe. She was ready, ready to trust, ready to hope, ready to bloom. Chapter 10 Love in Full Bloom. Valentine's Day dawned crisp and bright, sunlight spilling across the greenhouse like liquid gold. Stephanie stood in the center of her shop, surrounded by roses in every shade, crimson, ivory, blush pink, and the daring streak of orange she'd grown just for fun. The air was thick with perfume and promise, and for the first time in years, Stephanie felt something she hadn't dared to hope for. Joy. The morning rush was relentless, customers streaming in, bouquets flying out the door, laughter and chatter filling the space. Stephanie moved like a conductor in a symphony of petals, her hands steady, her heart humming. And through it all, one thought pulsed beneath the chaos. Would Nathan come? He hadn't said he would. After last night, the candles, the roses, the quiet conversation that felt like a turning point, she'd gone to bed with her heart tangled in hope. But hope was fragile, and Stephanie had learned the hard way not to trust it too easily. Still, when the bell above the door chimed mid-afternoon, her breath caught. Nathan stepped inside, snow melting on his boots, a bouquet in his hands. Not just any bouquet, a wild, glorious mix of roses in every color, tied with a ribbon that shimmered like sunlight. His smile was slow, warm, and just a little nervous. "Happy Valentine's Day," he said, his voice low. Stephanie stared, her throat tight. "Nathan, that's beautiful." "Not as beautiful as what you've built here," Nathan said, his gaze sweeping the greenhouse before settling on her. "Steph, this place, it's you. Strong, bright, full of life." Stephanie swallowed hard, her heart thudding like wings against glass. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Nathan said, stepping closer. "Because I need you to know something." Stephanie's breath hitched. "What?" Nathan set the bouquet on the counter, his hands steady even as his voice softened. "I came back here thinking it was temporary. A few months, help my uncle clear my head. But then I saw you. And suddenly, nothing about this feels temporary." Stephanie blinked, heat prickling behind her eyes. "Nathan, I like you," he said simply. "More than I've liked anyone in a long time. And I know you've been hurt. I know trust doesn't come easy. But I'm here, Steph. I'm not going anywhere." The words hung between them, fragile and electric. Stephanie felt something inside her shift, like a door opening, like sunlight breaking through clouds. She wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but the words tangled. So she did the only thing she could. She stepped forward and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, like testing the strength of a stem. Then Nathan's arms slid around her, warm and sure, and the kiss deepened, slow, tender, full of promises neither of them had spoken but both understood. When they finally broke apart, breathless and laughing, Stephanie felt lighter than she had in years. Like the weight of the past had fallen away, leaving only this moment, bright, blooming, and impossibly sweet. Nathan rested his forehead against hers, his voice a whisper. "So, was that a yes?" Stephanie smiled, her heart steady for the first time in forever. It was a yes. The rest of the day passed in a blur of roses and laughter, but Stephanie barely noticed, because every time she looked up, Nathan was there, steady, grounding, and hers. And for the first time in years, Stephanie believed in second chances, because sometimes, love doesn't just bloom, it thrives. Chapter 11 The Truth Unfolds. The morning after Valentine's Day was quiet, almost reverent. The shop smelled faintly of roses and ribbon, the remnants of yesterday's chaos tucked neatly away. Stephanie stood behind the counter, sipping coffee, her heart still buoyant from Nathan's kiss, soft, sure, and full of promises she hadn't dared to believe in. She was arranging a bouquet when her phone buzzed. A new email. Stephanie glanced at the screen and froze. Subject, follow-up, proof attached from. A friend. Her pulse thudded as she opened it. "Stephanie, as promised, here's the evidence. The logs show your credentials were used remotely. Someone spoofed your login from an external IP. The timestamps match your work logs proving you weren't in the building. The culprit? A senior analyst who left the company 6 months after you were fired. They covered their tracks, but the audit caught it later. I thought you deserved to know. A friend. Stephanie stared at the screen, her breath shallow. Proof. Real, undeniable proof. She scrolled through the attachments, screenshots of logs, IP traces, internal memos. It was all there. Everything she'd said, everything she'd fought for, laid bare. Her throat tightened. She'd imagined this moment 100 times, vindication, justice, but now that it was here, it felt complicated. Relief tangled with anger, grief with something like peace. Years of humiliation, of second-guessing herself, of wondering if she could have done more. They all pressed against her chest, heavy and sharp. Stephanie sank onto the stool, her hands trembling. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. She wanted to tell someone. She wanted to tell Nathan. The bell above the door chimed, and Stephanie jolted. Nathan stepped inside, his smile easy, his presence grounding in a way she desperately needed. "Morning," he said, brushing snow from his jacket. "You look intense." Stephanie laughed weakly. "You could say that." Nathan crossed the room, his gaze steady. "What's going on?" Stephanie hesitated, then pushed the phone toward him. "Read this." Nathan scanned the email, his jaw tightening as he scrolled through the attachments. When he looked up, his eyes burned with quiet fury. "They blamed you for this?" His voice was low, controlled, but Stephanie heard the anger beneath it. "Yes," she whispered, "and I couldn't prove them wrong." Nathan set the phone down, his hands curling into fists. "Steph, this is huge. You can clear your name." Stephanie swallowed hard. "Does it matter? It's been years. I've built a new life." Nathan's gaze softened, fierce and tender all at once. "It matters because you deserve the truth. You deserve to know it wasn't you." Stephanie blinked, heat prickling behind her eyes. "I thought I'd moved on, but seeing this, it's like ripping open an old wound." Nathan stepped closer, his voice low. "Then let me help you close it." Stephanie stared at him, her heart thudding. "Why do you care so much?" Nathan smiled, slow and steady. "Because I care about you." The words hung between them, fragile and electric. Stephanie felt something inside her shift, like a weight lifting, like sunlight breaking through clouds. She wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but the words tangled. So she did the only thing she could. She reached for his hand. Nathan's fingers closed around hers, strong and sure. "Whatever you decide," he said softly. "I'm with you." Stephanie swallowed hard, her throat tight. "Thank you." Nathan smiled, warm enough to melt the frost between them. Always. That night, Stephanie sat at her kitchen table, the email glowing on her laptop screen. She drafted a response to the sender. "Thank you," gratitude spilling into every word. She didn't know what she'd do next. Contact the company, clear her name publicly, or let it rest. But for the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't felt since the day everything fell apart. Peace. And maybe, just maybe, the courage to bloom again. Chapter 12, Staying for Good. The greenhouse shimmered under a pale winter sun, its glass panes catching light like diamonds. Stephanie stood among her roses, pruning a stubborn stem, her thoughts drifting like petals on water. The email still lingered in her mind. The proof, the vindication, the quiet sense of closure she hadn't expected to feel. For the first time in years, the weight of the past had loosened its grip. But another thought pressed closer, warmer, more insistent. Nathan. Since Valentine's Day, everything between them had shifted, softly, steadily, like roots deepening beneath the soil. Coffee had turned into dinners, laughter into late-night talks, and kisses that left her breathless and wanting more. And yet, a question bloomed in the back of her mind, stubborn as a thorn. How long before he left? Stephanie had learned not to trust permanence. People moved on, promises faded, and Nathan, handsome, talented, with a world beyond this small town, couldn't possibly stay forever. The bell above the door chimed, and Stephanie looked up, her heart skipping like a stone on water. Nathan stepped inside, snow melting on his boots, his smile slow and warm. But there was something in his eyes today, something steady, deliberate, like a man carrying a decision. "Morning," he said, brushing off his jacket. "Got a minute?" Stephanie nodded, her pulse quickening. "Always." Nathan crossed the room, his presence filling the space like sunlight. He stopped in front of her, his gaze unwavering. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low, "about the project I turned down, about what I want." Stephanie swallowed hard, bracing herself. "Nathan, I'm staying," he said simply. Stephanie blinked. "Staying?" Nathan smiled, slow and certain. "For good." Her breath caught. "But, the city, your work, I can work from here," Nathan said. "Design isn't tied to skyscrapers. And honestly, I don't want skyscrapers anymore. I want this." His eyes swept the greenhouse before settling on her. "I want you." Stephanie stared at him, her heart thudding like wings against glass. "Nathan." He stepped closer, his voice soft but sure. "Steph, I've spent years chasing things that didn't matter. Deadlines, contracts, clients who barely remembered my name. But you matter. This matters. And I'm done running from what I want. The words hung between them, fragile and electric. Stephanie felt something inside her shift, like a door opening, like sunlight breaking through clouds. She wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but the words tangled. So she did the only thing she could. She reached for him. Nathan's arms slid around her, warm and strong, and the kiss was everything. Soft and fierce, tender and certain, full of promises that didn't need words. When they broke apart, breathless and laughing, Stephanie felt lighter than she had in years. "You're really staying?" she whispered. Nathan smiled, his forehead resting against hers. "Try and get rid of me." Stephanie laughed, tears pricking her eyes. Not a chance. That night, they sat in the greenhouse, candles flickering, roses glowing like jewels. They talked about plans, his work, her shop, the life they could build together. And for the first time in forever, Stephanie didn't just believe in second chances. She believed in forever. Chapter 13 Epilogue. Love in bloom. Spring arrived like a quiet miracle, painting the town in soft greens and bursts of color. The greenhouse shimmered under the morning sun, its glass panes catching light like jewels. Inside, rows of roses stretched in every shade imaginable: crimson, ivory, blush pink, and the daring orange that had become Stephanie's signature. Stephanie stood at the center of it all, her hands dusted with soil, her heart steady and full. The past felt like a distant shadow now, faded, powerless. She had faced it, closed it, and walked forward into something brighter. Into this. The bell above the door chimed, and Stephanie looked up, smiling before she even saw him. Nathan stepped inside, sunlight catching in his hair, his smile slow and warm, the kind of smile that still made her pulse skip, even now. He carried a tray of coffee and a paper bag that smelled suspiciously like scones. "You're spoiling me," Stephanie teased, wiping her hands on her apron. "Tradition," Nathan said, setting the tray on the counter. "Besides, you've got a big day." Stephanie tilted her head. "Big day," Nathan grinned. "Grand opening of the new greenhouse section? The one you've been planning for months." Stephanie laughed, shaking her head. "It's not that big." "It's huge," Nathan said, his voice soft but certain. "Just like you." Heat crept up Stephanie's neck, but she smiled, her heart humming like a bee in summer. "You're biased." "Completely," Nathan said, stepping closer. "And I'm not sorry." They walked through the greenhouse together, coffee in hand, sunlight spilling across petals. Stephanie pointed out the new section. Rows of peonies and tulips, a corner for wildflowers, and Nathan listened, his gaze steady, his presence grounding in a way she still marveled at. "You've built something incredible," he said quietly. "Not just this place. A life." Stephanie swallowed hard, her throat tight. "I couldn't have done it without you." Nathan smiled, slow and tender. "You could have. But I'm glad you didn't have to." Stephanie laughed softly, tears pricking her eyes. "Me too." Later, they sat at the corner table, the one her mother and friends had claimed for years, candles flickering, roses glowing like jewels. Outside, the world was waking to spring, but inside, everything felt timeless. Nathan reached across the table, his fingers closing around hers, warm and sure. "Steph," he said, his voice low. "I meant what I said. I'm here. For good." Stephanie squeezed his hand, her heart steady for the first time in forever. "And I'm glad," she whispered, "because I'm not letting you go." Nathan smiled, his eyes bright with something that felt like forever. "Deal." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the greenhouse in shades of gold and rose, Stephanie leaned against Nathan, her head on his shoulder, her heart full. She had lost everything once. She had fallen, broken, and bloomed again. And now, sitting among the flowers she'd nurtured, with the man who had become her anchor and her joy, Stephanie knew the truth. Love doesn't just bloom, it thrives.